What's up, guys? It's Bromley from Empire Barbell. I am in my truck right now. So in the meantime, I'm going to go over some more comments. So G, it's a pretty anonymous handle. G put, question, if I'm adding load but decreasing volume as the weeks go by, would that be considered an intensity block? If so, would a volume block consist of decreasing load and adding more volume as the weeks go by? Probably a dumb question, but hey, I would like to know. Thanks in advance. It's not a dumb question at all. There's the devil's in the details, as they say. So for as much as we get sold on these individual modes of progressions or philosophies or training programs, when you sit down to actually write something, those are the things that'll get people stuck. It's like if you kind of know the story you want to tell in a piece of literature, but you don't know the words you use to connect sentences and ideas together. The little stuff is what'll sit there and make you scratch your head. Like, okay, should I do more sets the next week? Should I do less? Should I change the percentages in that time? To what degree? How much easier or difficult should it be? Those are the things that I always got stuck on, and those are the things I like to address because you're probably struggling with them too. So, not a dumb question at all. Everyone has a broad concept of what these labels mean, but how to actually organize them on paper is a different thing. I certainly struggled with the specifics. I did. I really did. Dropping volume while upping the weight is intensification, and you can do that at any threshold. Classic linear approaches will actually have you start with that method at the earliest phases, high volume, low percentages, and continue with it all the way down to your peak. What constitutes a volume or intensity block should, in my opinion, have more to do with how much emphasis is put on one or the other relative to the rest of your entire cycle. So whether you're adding sets over a block or decreasing or whatever, that's a method of progression. It doesn't necessarily dictate whether or not that's a volume block or not. That's going to be determined on how much volume you're using relative to what you're used to. So if you have 4 weeks that are a bit heavier and have much less work than the weeks before it, I would call that an intensity block. If you came back from a meet peak or some other period of higher percentage work and are now trying to adapt to more work at lighter percentages, I would label that a volume block. The method you mentioned, increasing volume as the weeks go by, is a hugely effective means of growth and one that few people actually implement. This is true. I call it volumization, adding volume over time, chasing volume. And I've had immense success with it off season when you're not really focused on strength as a way of getting bigger and broadening out that base. And it's something that you don't see written about a lot. And I think the next little bit I do on programming is going to have more to do with that because of how little has been written about it. You have to think, if you start a classical linear periodization block, true linearity, you're starting, let's say 5, 6, 7 sets of whatever, 10, 12 reps, and you're dropping linearly, okay? Every workout, you're peeling away reps and sets. Every workout, you're adding weight. So you get these straight lines. Volume drops, intensity climbs up. But when you're chasing volume, when you're trying to grow, you're trying to adapt to volume. So it doesn't make sense to have the highest volume week you start with at the point where you are the least conditioned to that volume. So that's why you'll see preparatory blocks in certain more formal systems of training. You'll see blocks that try to get you used to the work and then jack the volume up. I have had a ton of success actually doing a program where at the end of 6 or 8 weeks, the goal is for that to be your highest volume week, because that's where you've slowly and steadily increased the weight and the volume to the point where you can handle that work to begin with. And when you adapt to that, man, the gains they're exponential. They're huge. You don't necessarily need to drop weight. You just aren't making weekly jumps your number one priority. You can step load, keeping the percentages the same and adding more sets each week. So step loading, the weight just goes like this. But you might find that each week you're going to do an extra set. If it feels easier, you might add a rep or two to the end of it. There's a lot of ways to step load. Or you can actually make little tiny variations, adding to or aiming to add weight, but not necessarily trying to make dramatic jumps in weight. You're just trying to use that as another mode of steadily jacking the volume up week to week. But 5 pounds, 10 pounds on your lift doesn't even come close to having the same effect on total volume as if you simply add a rep to multiple sets, or if you simply add a set. That has the biggest impact on volume in a workout. So in a volumization block, that's really where your emphasis is going to be. I had written a brutally effective program that starts with around 3 sets of 12, about 60%. And that's enough to make anyone sore who's ever gone over 10 reps, and make small jumps as you adapt to the increases in volume, going something like 3 by 12 to 5 by 12 to 5 by 10 to 6 by 8 to 8 by 8. So the total number of reps are steadily increasing. And at around the threshold you're going to be at, even if the weight kind of stays the same or tapers up a little bit, you're going to see overall volume increase dramatically. So by the time you get to that 4th, 5th, 6th week, You're going to find your capacity is going to be better. You're going to be a lot bigger. You're going to have more size on. You're going to have tangible, noticeable improvements in your performance with that volume work that is going to suggest that when you start to drop the reps, drop the amount of work, and you make a substantial jump into the next intensity bracket, you are going to be much better suited to handle those heavier loads. And that's the meat and potatoes of periodization. There's nothing magical about the classical super linear approach. Every time you make a change, you're kind of challenging how linear it is, because classical is not very strictly defined. If you add in a deload, it challenges the linearity of it. If you decide, instead of picking up where you left off, if you just drop back a little bit and wave back up, that challenges it a little bit, but it's not so distinctly different that we can call it something else entirely. So the broad principle we look at, that even in a purely classical example, which nobody really uses, but the idea in those first few weeks is to adapt to the volume. It's to get those 10s, 12s, those repeating sets where that huge soreness sets in, to get you used to that, because the process of getting used to that is how you grow in the first place. So that was actually a really good question, G, and I'm going to do more on those types of progressions, because like I said, I did have a lot of success with them.